My girlfriend and I arrived at the house a few hours before the rest of the family. The trip there was insanely tiring, not just because of how long it was, but because the roads were narrow, winding, and surrounded by forests and old houses spaced far apart. It felt like stepping into another world. Every turn gave us the feeling that we were lost, especially since the GPS kept lagging and the signal had started disappearing about 20 minutes before we arrived. It was exhausting in a way that words can't quite explain, and nighttime in that area didn't offer any comfort. The roads were deserted, streetlights were extremely rare, and the silence was so deep that even our own breathing sounded loud. The house we rented was hidden between two other houses, but it sat farther back from the main road, which made us almost miss it on our first try. We had to reverse slowly and look for a small sign near a tree to make sure it was the right house. From the outside, the house looked pretty ordinary. The front yard was small, just enough space for one car, and there was no fence. A gravel path led us to a small, undecorated porch. But once we stepped inside, the house revealed another side. The front room had already been renovated. The floors were made of new wood. The wall paint was clean, and the kitchen was modern with hanging lights and stainless steel appliances. But behind the kitchen, there was a sliding door that looked out of place. Once we opened that door, we entered the old part of the house. The atmosphere changed drastically. The ceiling was lower. The floor was made of wooden planks that creaked with every step, and the air carried an old scent, not rotten, but musty, like a small museum or a grandmother's house that had been abandoned for years. They said the back area was the original structure from the 19th century, and I believe it, because even though it had been repainted, that part had a completely different feel. Darker, heavier, and honestly, not very comfortable to stay in alone for long. But the one thing that got us excited when we first saw the house was the backyard. It was huge, filled with well-kept green grass, and there was a big tree standing right in the middle, the kind of old tree, with a thick trunk and branches that shaded most of the yard from the midday heat. A short wooden fence surrounded the entire back area, just enough to make us feel safe letting our dog roam freely. In one corner of the yard, there was a circular fire pit complete with handmade wooden benches, cut from a giant tree trunk. That spot instantly became our favorite place to sit at night. The evening sea breeze would drift in gently, and if you closed your eyes, it felt like all the weight of the city just disappeared for a while. From the outside, that place seemed perfect for a peaceful family getaway. We spent our first night opening up the windows to let fresh air in. The house had gotten a bit stuffy. Maybe it had been empty for a few weeks. It felt so good to lie in bed and listen to the breeze coming through and the sounds of nature outside. No traffic noise, no sirens, no loud neighbors, just the wind, the leaves, and the occasional insects. That first night, everything felt perfect, peaceful, but that peace didn't last long. Around 9 at night, my younger brother, who was sleeping in the upstairs bedroom, said he heard a sound coming from outside his window. At first, he thought it was just someone walking by or maybe a family member who had just arrived. But when he looked out, there was no one there. His girlfriend, who shared the room with him, didn't hear anything and even laughed at him. But he kept insisting. He said it was really clear, someone whispering, the voice soft but close, like someone was standing right under the window. That night, we just assumed he was exhausted. A long trip can mess with your mind, we thought, so we just listened to his story, teased him a little, and everyone went back to whatever they were doing. But over the next few nights, the same story kept happening, and always at the same time, a little past 9. The sound was still the same, like two people whispering very softly, but still, only he could hear it. His girlfriend still didn't hear anything and started getting annoyed because every morning she had to hear complaints she thought were exaggerated. My brother started getting frustrated. His face looked more tired every morning, and he started speaking with the tone of someone genuinely confused, not someone just seeking attention. I started noticing the way he talked. His eyes wouldn't leave the floor. The way he paused mid-sentence like he was thinking hard. He didn't look like someone making things up. He looked like someone who had been feeling alone for far too long. I even thought maybe it was the sound of a small animal, or leaves rustling in the wind, or maybe voices from the neighboring house slipping through the window cracks. But why was it only my brother who heard it? Why did the voice always come from the same direction? At the same time, I still thought those questions were small, until that night came, the night when it all stopped being funny. On the second to last night, the entire family finally gathered. The house, which had previously felt spacious and quiet, suddenly felt smaller, filled with laughter, fast-paced conversations, and the sound of footsteps going back and forth. In the kitchen, a few people were chatting while preparing drinks. In the sunroom, cards were being shuffled, followed by bursts of laughter. Others were busy in the backyard, setting up snacks, lighting the fire pit, and arranging the log benches for everyone to sit together. It felt like a small reunion that hadn't happened in a long time. Everyone was catching up, sharing stories from the past year, and even though some of it was just small talk, the atmosphere was warm and genuine. That night, the sea breeze was cool. Fresh air flowed in through the partially open windows, carrying a salty scent that was oddly calming. In the backyard, the fire pit glowed softly, casting an orange light on the faces gathered around. Only the kitchen and sunroom lights were left on. The rest was darkness. And in that peaceful dark, the night was supposed to pass quietly. As usual, my younger brother and his girlfriend went out for their evening walk. They did it every night, said it was their way of having more intimate conversations without distractions. Their favorite route was along the main road, looping a bit toward the neighbor's house that sat farther down before circling back home. Normally, they were never gone for long, but that night, several minutes passed, and suddenly, my brother's girlfriend showed up again in the backyard. She wasn't walking casually like usual, she was running, breathless, her face pale and full of panic. Without much explanation, she grabbed my hand and said in a trembling voice, "Your brother needs you, right now." I didn't have time to ask anything. My instincts kicked in immediately. I followed him into the house, through the living room and kitchen still filled with the sounds of family, then out again through the front door. The moment we stepped outside, I could feel something was off. The road in front of the house was incredibly dark. Streetlights were only placed at certain points, and they were spaced far apart. The rest was pitch black, with only faint outlines of trees and the road stretching toward the neighboring house. We walked quickly in that direction, and from a distance, I could already see my brother standing alone by the side of the road. His posture was tense, but his face didn't show panic, more like a mix of excitement and nervousness, like someone who had finally found something they'd been looking for, but wasn't sure if it was a good thing. When I reached him, he immediately pointed into the distance and said in a low but pressured voice, "He's there." He's the one whispering. I finally saw him. I followed the direction of his finger, and there, faintly under the faraway streetlight, was a figure walking very slowly, back and forth in the middle of the road. The movement was strange, too slow for a normal person, like he was being dragged or weighed down by something heavy. At first, I thought it was just someone out for a night jog, but the more I looked, the more things started to feel off. It wasn't just the slow movement. There was a sound coming from his direction, very faint, like a constant whisper. Not someone talking to themselves or humming. It was more like a chant, a murmuring repeated over and over with the same rhythm. My chest started to tighten, not from direct fear, but from a strange feeling stuck in my throat that made it hard to breathe normally. My brother's girlfriend stood behind us, silent, her face pale and tense. My brother said he wanted to go up to him, to find out who it was, but I immediately grabbed his arm and said, "Don't! We don't know who he is, don't go near him." He resisted for a moment, still insisting, but finally he gave in. That figure, without us realizing it at first, had started moving farther away into the dead-end road up ahead, a road lined with thick trees and ending in a small forest with no way out. "He'll have to come back through here," I said quietly, my eyes still locked on the dark spot where he disappeared. And yes, it was true. Not even a minute passed before he came out of the darkness again, still with the same slow steps, still pacing back and forth, still whispering, but this time, he was getting closer. I looked at my brother, then at his girlfriend, and said firmly, "We're going back to the house. Now." The three of us quickly walked back toward the house. We entered through the front door, past the living room and kitchen still filled with the sound of family laughter. They had no idea. To them, the night was still warm and cheerful, but we knew there was something slowly moving from the direction of the front yard, something that didn't belong there. We slipped to the side of the fence that bordered the neighbor's driveway. From there, we could see more clearly without standing directly in the street. At that moment, no one had fully realized it yet, but the atmosphere, it was starting to shift. Slowly. My brother and I stood still behind the side fence of the house, right at the area that directly faced the neighbor's driveway. That place was dark in a way that felt thick and heavy. The only source of light was the bonfire in the backyard, about 30 feet behind us. But the orange glow from the fire wasn't enough to reach this side of the house. Instead, the shadows of trees and wooden fences made everything look even gloomier. If you stood where we were and looked straight ahead, all you'd see was a long tunnel of darkness, walls of tall trees on both sides, worn-out wooden fencing, and gravel leading to the end of the neighbor's driveway. That's where the sound was coming from. The sound that hadn't stopped all this time. The three of us, me, my brother, and his girlfriend, didn't speak. Maybe because we didn't know what to say, or maybe because we felt like our voices could attract the attention of something that wasn't supposed to know we were watching it. His girlfriend stood a little behind us, her head bowed low, as if she knew that if she looked directly, she wouldn't be able to forget what she saw. Our eyes were slowly adjusting to the darkness of the area, and gradually, I started to see that silhouette again. It appeared out of the darkness, its body swaying gently with dragging footsteps. Its movement was slow, stiff, like someone learning how to walk, or like its body was too heavy to be supported by normal bones and muscles. But what disturbed me most was the whisper, still audible, faint, broken, but consistent, like breath being forced out of a narrow throat. At that moment, my brother and I almost simultaneously raised our phones and turned on the flashlights. The white light from the screen instantly pierced through the darkness, slicing the cold night air, and in a second, the atmosphere in this backyard shifted. The laughter and chatter of our family, which had been lively, suddenly stopped. Everyone sitting stood up immediately, a few peeking toward us, confused why we suddenly looked serious and were facing the fence, but we didn't say anything. Because honestly, we didn't know how to explain it either. All we knew was that we needed to get a clearer look at whatever was in front of us. And when the light hit the figure, for the first time, we saw him clearly. He stood under the beam of light, only about 10 steps from where we were. A tall figure in an oversized black hoodie hanging loosely over his body. His pants were dark, and his whole body was covered in layers of fabric, like a thick, wrinkled winter coat. His head was bowed, and his face was completely hidden. But strangely, he didn't move, didn't react, as if he didn't realize he was now the center of attention, as if the light meant nothing to him. He just kept standing there, his body slightly swaying, and his whisper, the whisper that had only been faint before, was now becoming clearer. But not clear in a way that could be understood. His murmuring was still hazy, like an old song without lyrics, its tone rising and falling without direction, filling the night with a rhythm that made your skin crawl. My whole body started to freeze up. It felt like something inside me already knew that whatever we were looking at right now wasn't an ordinary human. My brother looked tense too, his eyes wide open, his breathing heavy, his body leaning slightly forward, like he still had some strange urge to get closer. Someone from the backyard tried to break the tension by calling out softly, "Hello?" But there was no response. The figure stayed right there, like no one present could actually reach him. He just kept slowly swaying in place, his voice now sounding like some kind of ritual chant lost to history. In my head, thoughts started to fight for space. Who is this person? Why does he always show up at the neighbor's driveway? Why was my brother the only one who heard him from the start? And why, when he clearly knows he's being watched and lit up, doesn't he show any sign of awareness? All those questions echoed in my head, but none of them had answers. Because the longer I looked at him, the more I realized he wasn't just a stranger. He wasn't something that could be explained by any normal nighttime logic. From behind us, the family started moving quickly. The fire pit was put out in a hurry. A few people began entering the house through the back door, one by one, no shouting, no panic, but their steps were quick, their heads down. No one asked questions, no one told stories. Everyone somehow knew, in a strange and quiet way, that there was something outside with us that wasn't supposed to be there. My brother and I stayed where we were, still pointing our flashlights at the figure, until eventually it slowly backed away and disappeared again into the dark, like it was being swallowed by nothingness. That night, none of us slept with the windows open. Every door was locked twice, some even barricaded with chairs or suitcases. But the weirdest thing, none of us spoke about what had happened that night. Not because we forgot, and not because we didn't care, but because, deep inside each of us, we all knew, whatever it was we saw that night, whatever whispers still faintly echoed in our minds, there would never be an answer that could make us feel safe again. That night, we saw something no human was meant to see. Something we never invited, but somehow, it came anyway.